Have you ever wondered why people in crowds behave so differently from when they are alone? Gustave Le Bon's The Crowd reveals the hidden psychology behind mass movements, showing how emotions, beliefs, and leaders can sway entire populations. In this summary, we'll uncover the secrets of crowd behavior and explore how collective minds shape history. When Gustave Le Bon published The Crowd, a study of the popular mind, he wasn't simply writing about mobs in the streets or political uprisings. He was trying to understand a deeper phenomenon, one that follows humanity wherever it goes. What happens to the human mind when it stops thinking as an individual and begins to think as part of a crowd? Le Bon noticed something remarkable. The moment individuals merge into a collective, their behavior changes in ways that feel almost like alchemy. The calm can become impulsive, the rational can become emotional, and the moral can become unpredictable. A person who is careful and self-aware in isolation may turn bold, fearful, generous, or destructive when surrounded by others who share the same energy. The crowd does not simply amplify human behavior, it transforms it. It creates a new kind of mind, a mind driven less by reason and more by emotion. A mind that responds not to detailed argument, but to symbols, images, and powerful feelings. A mind that can build nations or tear them apart. What makes this book especially striking today is how clearly it mirrors our digital age. Modern crowds gather not only in squares and stadiums, but in comment sections, hashtags, and viral storms. Outrage spreads in seconds. Trends rise and collapse overnight. Emotional waves pass through millions with the same force Le Bon described more than a century ago. This introduction invites you into one of the most fascinating psychological explorations ever written, a journey into the forces that shape masses of people, guide their decisions, and influence the course of history. Understanding the crowd means understanding the world around us, and perhaps even understanding ourselves in those moments when we too become part of something larger. If this exploration sparks your curiosity, make sure to like the video, subscribe to Read and Rise, and stay with us as we dive deeper into the hidden psychology of human behavior. Chapter 1. The Birth of the Collective Mind. Le Bon begins his journey by explaining a striking transformation. The moment individuals gather into a crowd, something new emerges, a collective mind that does not resemble the minds of the people who compose it. This new mind behaves like a living organism with its own impulses, emotions, and desires. To understand this transformation, Le Bon identifies three forces that dissolve individuality and give rise to the psychology of the crowd. Number 1. Anonymity, the disappearance of personal responsibility. When a person becomes part of a crowd, they feel hidden. The eyes of society, the judgment of others, and the weight of personal consequences seem to fade. In this anonymity, individuals often dare what they would never do alone, speaking more boldly, acting more impulsively, or joining behaviors they would normally condemn. Le Bon suggests that anonymity acts like a mask, freeing people from the restraints that usually shape civilized behavior. And behind the mask, the inner primitive instincts, normally contained, find space to surface. Number 2. Suggestibility, the open gate of influence. Inside a crowd, something curious happens. People become more susceptible to suggestion. Ideas that would normally face resistance are absorbed with surprising ease. A strong voice, a dramatic gesture, or a repeated message can shape the crowd's thinking almost instantly. This suggestibility is not the result of weakness, but of emotional synchronization. When individuals feel the same emotion together, fear, excitement, indignation, their critical filters soften. They begin responding to the shared feeling rather than to rational thought.
And number 3, contagion, the spread of emotion like fire. Emotion spreads rapidly within a crowd, much like flames leaping from branch to branch in a dry forest. One person's enthusiasm becomes collective excitement. One person's panic becomes mass fear. One person's anger can erupt into a storm. Le Bon describes contagion as the true engine of crowd psychology. It creates a sense of unity, a shared rhythm, a single heartbeat. And once the crowd beats together, it behaves less like a group of individuals and more like a singular, powerful force. The result: a new psychological entity. Through anonymity, suggestibility, and emotional contagion, the individual mind dissolves and a collective mind emerges. This mind is impulsive, reactive, and deeply emotional. It does not analyze, it feels. It does not weigh consequences, it acts. It does not follow reason, it responds to symbols, images, and simple ideas that strike the imagination. Le Bon does not portray the crowd as inherently good or evil, only as fundamentally different. A crowd can be heroic or violent, compassionate or cruel. What matters is the emotion guiding it, and the voice influencing it. The birth of the collective mind marks the beginning of everything that follows: mass movements, revolutions, political waves, cultural shifts, and the rise and fall of leaders who understand how to speak to this powerful psychological force. The mind of the crowd. As Le Bon pushes further into his dissection of the crowd's inner machinery, he stresses a strange paradox. The moment individuals gather, something vanishes and something new is born. Personal responsibility fades like mist under a rising sun, and in its place emerges a collective creature, primitive, impulsive, and irresistibly confident. This creature doesn't negotiate or analyze, it feels. And those feelings spread at breathtaking speed, leaping from one person to another until they fuse into a single emotional fire. In Le Bon's view, a crowd can move from calm to frenzy in minutes, not because each person chooses it, but because the shared emotional circuit short-circuits individual restraint. He goes further, suggesting that the crowd's mental unity is so strong that it becomes more akin to a single organism than a group of separate minds. This collective mind has no interest in nuance. It prefers absolutes. It wants heroes to worship or enemies to destroy. The gray zones where truth usually lives are washed out by the crowd's hunger for simple, dramatic answers. He argues that this is why crowds are so easily swayed, not by logic or debate, but by vivid images, dramatic symbols, repetition, and the illusion of certainty. The crowd thinks in pictures, not paragraphs. It reacts to impressions, not evidence. And because it cannot tolerate uncertainty, it accepts even the most fragile of ideas as long as they arrive wrapped in emotion. To Le Bon, the crowd's thinking resembles the ancient mind of early humans, rich in passion, poor in skepticism. And once someone steps into a crowd, even the educated and rational can find themselves pulled backwards into this older mental state. The result is that crowds act with a kind of ancient force, powerful enough to reshape history, topple institutions, and remake societies. This first chapter sets the stage for a larger argument. If crowds think differently, they behave differently, and they can be both marvelously creative or catastrophically destructive, depending on who manages to steer their emotions. As we continue, the book begins to reveal exactly how leaders, ideas, and symbols gain the power to move entire populations.
Chapter 2. The opinions and beliefs of crowds. Le Bon then takes us deeper into the mechanics of how a belief becomes sacred within a crowd. Once an idea has rooted itself in the collective mind, the crowd treats it not only as truth, but as identity. Challenging that belief becomes, in their eyes, an attack on the group itself.
And in the psychology of crowds, identity always outweighs accuracy. This is why crowds frequently swing between extremes. They may adore a leader one moment, only to despise him the next. They may demand justice with passion, yet turn violent without hesitation. The stability that individuals show in private life rarely survives the melting pot of collective emotion. Le Bon argues that this instability is not a flaw, but a structural feature of mass psychology, driven by how crowds adopt and defend ideas. The process of forming collective convictions often relies on three forces he repeatedly emphasizes: affirmation, repetition, and contagion. Affirmation is the act of stating something with unwavering confidence. Crowds respond far more to certainty than to nuance. A hesitant truth loses to a confident falsehood if the latter is delivered with bold emotional force. Repetition then reinforces that affirmation. The idea appears again and again through speeches, symbols, slogans, chants, images. Each repetition feels like new confirmation, strengthening the emotional bond the crowd has to the belief. Finally comes contagion. Once a belief begins spreading, individuals adopt it because others adopt it. Not because they understand it, but because they fear isolation or desire to belong. Human beings, Le Bon reminds us, are deeply imitative creatures, and imitation spreads ideas faster than logic ever could. As these forces work together, a crowd begins to develop its own moral universe. It creates its own heroes, villains, myths, and truths. Logic no longer holds the authority. Emotional coherence does. A belief feels right, and therefore becomes untouchable. One of the subtler points Le Bon raises is how crowds reinterpret reality to fit their established convictions. Facts are bent, memories reshaped, arguments filtered. Once a crowd embraces an idea, it selectively absorbs anything that supports it and rejects anything that threatens it. This is not conscious dishonesty. It is the natural consequence of emotional thinking dominating rational thought. At this stage, the crowd becomes capable of profound unity or profound destruction. With a shared belief, it can build nations, reform laws, or protect vulnerable groups. With the same emotional power, it can also persecute, exclude, or wage war. Belief itself is neutral. The crowd gives it direction. Le Bon's narrative moves steadily toward a pivotal insight. Crowds do not create beliefs on their own. They are given beliefs. The true architects of mass convictions are the leaders who understand how to plant seeds in the fertile soil of the collective mind. Leaders who know how to speak the language of the crowd, which is not the language of reason, but the language of emotion, symbolism, and unshakable certainty. This observation prepares the ground for the next chapter, where Le Bon unveils the psychology of leadership, how individuals rise to command the imagination of crowds, and how their influence can reshape entire societies. The path from belief to action always passes through the hands of those who master the art of suggestion. The chapter closes with a warning. The collective mind of a crowd has its own logic, often divorced from the individual intellect. Understanding this is essential to navigate social, political, and cultural movements. Chapter 3: Sentiments and Morality of Crowds. In this chapter, Gustave Le Bon delves deep into the psychology of crowds, exploring how their sentiments and moral standards differ dramatically from those of individuals. He emphasizes that when people join together in a crowd, their actions and judgments are no longer guided by personal reasoning or reflection. Instead, they become driven by collective emotions that spread like wildfire. Fear, anger, enthusiasm, or even zeal can dominate the group, overriding logic and individual restraint. Le Bon observes that the morality of a crowd is fluid and unpredictable. A crowd can elevate acts of heroism, generosity, and courage to astonishing heights, yet it can also descend into cruelty, destruction, or blind fanaticism. Unlike the consistent moral code that governs an individual, the crowd's ethics are situational, molded by immediate emotions and shared instincts. In moments of excitement or threat, ordinary people can commit acts they would never consider alone, their behavior amplified by the collective energy around them. The chapter also emphasizes the immense power of leaders in shaping the sentiments of crowds. A charismatic figure, even with modest means of persuasion, can guide the emotions of thousands or millions by appealing to simple, visceral feelings rather than reasoned argument. Symbols, slogans, and imagery become powerful tools, resonating deeply within the collective mind of the crowd. Historical examples abound. Military campaigns, revolutionary uprisings, and religious movements all reveal the extraordinary power of collective emotion. Individuals swept up in the tide of a crowd can achieve feats of courage, endurance, or creativity far beyond their personal capacity. At the same time, the same crowd can commit acts of violence, destruction, or irrationality that no individual alone would contemplate. This duality, the capacity for both greatness and folly, is central to understanding the psychology of the crowd. Le Bon closes the chapter with a crucial warning. The sentiments and morality of crowds are powerful, unpredictable, and often uncontrollable. Leaders, governments, and societies must recognize this reality to guide collective behavior responsibly and avoid chaos. By understanding the emotions that drive crowds, one can anticipate their reactions, harness their energy for constructive purposes, and mitigate the dangers of irrational collective action.
Chapter 4. The Role of Emotions, Symbols, and Beliefs in Crowds. In this chapter, Gustave Le Bon examines the profound influence of emotions, symbols, and shared beliefs on the behavior of crowds. He explains that individuals in a crowd are highly susceptible to emotional contagion, a phenomenon in which feelings spread rapidly, often overriding logic and personal judgment. When people come together, their minds merge into a collective consciousness, and rational thought is replaced by instinctive reactions. Fear, excitement, hope, and anger travel through the crowd like an invisible current, compelling members to act in ways they would never consider alone. Le Bon emphasizes that symbols and slogans hold enormous power over crowds. A simple emblem, a repeated phrase, or a striking image can evoke intense emotional responses, mobilizing the group toward a common goal. Crowds are drawn to clear and emotionally charged messages, not to nuanced reasoning. This is why political movements, religious ceremonies, and revolutionary uprisings often rely on symbolic acts to inspire collective action. The symbol becomes more than an object or phrase. It becomes a shared emotional anchor that binds the members of the crowd together. Beliefs, whether true or false, take on a life of their own within crowds. Le Bon observes that crowds adopt ideas with conviction, regardless of their factual accuracy. Once a sentiment is accepted collectively, it becomes self-reinforcing, and dissenting voices are often ignored or suppressed. This explains the remarkable persistence of myths, legends, and ideological convictions throughout history. The crowd does not weigh evidence objectively. It responds emotionally to ideas that resonate with its collective mindset. The chapter also explores the dual nature of emotional influence. While positive emotions like solidarity, courage, and enthusiasm can lead to constructive and heroic actions, negative emotions such as hatred, panic, and envy can trigger destructive behavior. Le Bon provides historical examples where collective fear or anger led to riots, mass violence, and social upheaval. Conversely, shared hope and excitement have inspired monumental achievements, from civil movements to scientific exploration. The determining factor is how the emotions are directed by leaders and the prevailing social context.
Le Bon concludes the chapter with a warning about the fragility of reason in the face of collective emotion. In a crowd, the mind of the individual is often dominated by shared impulses, and decisions are driven by sentiment rather than deliberation. Understanding the role of emotions, symbols, and beliefs is essential for anyone seeking to influence, guide, or study crowds. The chapter serves as a reminder that the collective power of the human mind is immense, but it is neither inherently rational nor predictable. It can create wonders or disasters, depending on how it is directed and controlled. Chapter 5: The Power of Leaders Over Crowds. In this chapter, Gustave Le Bon explores the immense influence that leaders exert on crowds. He explains that while crowds are emotional, suggestible, and often irrational, they are also highly receptive to guidance. A skilled leader can channel the energy, fears, and hopes of a crowd, turning chaotic impulses into directed action. Conversely, poor leadership can amplify instability, panic, or destructive behavior. Le Bon emphasizes that leaders do not primarily persuade through rational argument. Crowds rarely respond to logic or reasoned debate. Instead, they are swayed by strong imagery, simple slogans, and passionate appeals. A few well-chosen words or a compelling symbol can ignite enthusiasm, fear, or loyalty across thousands, even millions of people. The leader's role is to connect with the crowd's emotions, tapping into shared beliefs, sentiments, and instincts that bind the group together. He further notes that authority in a crowd is rarely earned by intelligence alone. It comes from the leader's ability to project certainty, confidence, and decisiveness. When individuals are absorbed into the collective mindset, they are more likely to follow someone who embodies strength and conviction. Even a small or ordinary figure can command immense influence if they master the art of emotional persuasion. Le Bon provides historical illustrations to show how leaders have directed the course of events through their control of crowds. Revolutionary figures, religious reformers, and political orators often achieve results that far exceed what their individual abilities would suggest. This is because the crowd amplifies the leader's influence, spreading their ideas, excitement, and fervor across the masses. A crowd's suggestibility, which can be dangerous in some contexts, becomes a powerful tool in the hands of a persuasive guide. However, Le Bon also warns of the dangers of manipulation. Crowds are easily led astray by unscrupulous leaders who appeal to fear, hatred, or greed. The same mechanisms that can achieve great societal change can also produce chaos, violence, or mass hysteria. Leaders must understand that their power carries profound responsibility. The collective mind of the crowd can either build or destroy, depending on how it is directed. Ultimately, Le Bon asserts that the psychology of leadership is inseparable from the psychology of crowds. To influence a crowd is to understand its emotional currents, its instinctive drives, and its susceptibility to suggestion. Rational debate may have little effect, but emotional connection, symbolic communication, and clear, repeated messages can move crowds to extraordinary action, for better or worse.
Chapter 6: The Formation and Spread of Beliefs in Crowds. In this chapter, Gustave Le Bon delves into how ideas, beliefs, and convictions take root and spread within crowds, shaping societies, revolutions, and historical events. He explains that a crowd is not merely a collection of individuals. It is a single, unified mind governed by emotion, habit, and suggestion. Within this collective consciousness, ideas gain a life of their own, independent of logic or factual accuracy. Le Bon emphasizes that crowds prefer simple, absolute, and emotionally charged ideas.
Nuanced reasoning, subtle arguments, or complex explanations are often ineffective. The mind of the crowd thrives on clarity and certainty. This is why slogans, symbols, and myths are incredibly potent. They bypass rational scrutiny and appeal directly to sentiment. Once an idea resonates emotionally, it spreads rapidly, much like a contagion, sweeping through the group with unstoppable momentum. He illustrates how historical movements, from religious revivals to political revolutions, demonstrate this principle. A compelling idea, even if based on partial truth or myth, can unite thousands or millions, motivating actions that no single individual could achieve alone. Crowds do not merely absorb ideas, they amplify them, transforming small sparks into widespread social phenomena. Enthusiasm, fear, or devotion can fuel the propagation of beliefs far beyond their original scope. Furthermore, he highlights the role of contagion in accelerating belief formation. Emotions and convictions spread quickly as members of the crowd influence one another. This phenomenon explains why crowds can experience sudden surges of enthusiasm, panic, or aggression. The speed and intensity of the spread can overwhelm reasoned voices, allowing beliefs to dominate collective behavior before careful deliberation can intervene. Le Bon concludes the chapter by stressing that understanding the mechanics of belief formation is crucial for anyone seeking to influence or predict crowd behavior. Ideas that appeal to the emotions, that are simple and vivid, and that resonate with shared sentiments will dominate. History, he asserts, is as much shaped by the psychology of crowds as by the actions of kings, generals, or statesmen. Recognizing the power of collective beliefs is key to comprehending revolutions, mass movements, and the enduring influence of ideology on human affairs.
Chapter 7: Collective Intelligence and the Limits of Individual Reasoning. In this chapter, Gustave Le Bon examines the intriguing paradox of crowds. While they can achieve remarkable feats through unity and shared enthusiasm, the intelligence of the individual is often diminished within the collective mind. He argues that a crowd is not simply the sum of its members' intellects. Instead, it behaves as a new psychological entity with its own rules, emotions, and limitations. Le Bon explains that individual judgment is weakened by the anonymity and suggestibility of the crowd. A person who is reasonable and cautious alone can act impulsively when absorbed into a group. The collective consciousness tends to override personal reasoning, favoring instinctive and emotional responses. This dynamic explains why crowds can embrace ideas and actions that an individual would reject in isolation. At the same time, Le Bon notes that crowds possess a form of collective intelligence. While individual reasoning may be clouded, the crowd can make swift decisions, coordinate actions on a large scale, and mobilize resources efficiently when guided by shared beliefs or a strong leader. This intelligence is practical, immediate, and often instinctive, relying on habits, repetition, and emotional cues rather than careful analysis or foresight. The chapter illustrates this balance between power and limitation with historical examples. Military campaigns, revolutionary movements, and social uprisings demonstrate how crowds can act decisively and achieve extraordinary outcomes. Yet the same crowds can make mistakes, act destructively, or adopt beliefs without evidence. The crowd's intelligence is functional but not rational, capable of accomplishing practical tasks but vulnerable to error and manipulation. Le Bon also emphasizes the role of emotional coherence in collective action. A crowd united by common sentiment, whether fear, enthusiasm, or devotion, can respond with remarkable speed and energy. The shared emotions amplify coordination and focus, allowing the crowd to achieve results far beyond what unorganized individuals could accomplish. However, this coherence comes at a cost. Rational scrutiny is suppressed, and critical thinking is weakened.
Ultimately, Le Bon concludes that understanding the limits and powers of collective intelligence is essential for leaders, policymakers, and anyone seeking to navigate mass movements. Crowds are capable of both greatness and folly, and their behavior is shaped less by logic than by emotion, suggestion, and social cohesion. Recognizing this dual nature, the crowd's practical energy alongside its vulnerability to error, is key to predicting, influencing, and responding to the psychological dynamics of the masses.
Chapter 8. The Influence of Ideas, Faith, and Customs on Crowds. In this chapter, Le Bon explores how ideas, religious faith, and customs act as guiding forces for crowds. He explains that while individuals may carefully weigh options and reason through choices, crowds are driven by tradition, shared beliefs, and powerful narratives. These collective elements provide a framework for action, often replacing rational deliberation with automatic adherence to inherited principles or emotionally compelling ideas. Le Bon observes that faith, whether religious, political, or ideological, acts as a stabilizing and motivating force. It binds members of the crowd together, offering shared purpose and identity. Crowds that share strong beliefs are more cohesive, easier to mobilize, and capable of extraordinary collective effort. At the same time, rigid adherence to dogma can blind the crowd to reason, leading to fanaticism, intolerance, and resistance to new evidence. Customs and traditions also wield immense power over collective behavior. Crowds are guided less by individual preferences than by socially ingrained habits and accepted norms. These inherited behaviors form a lens through which the crowd interprets new situations. Even when circumstances change, the weight of tradition can strongly influence decisions, sometimes preventing innovation, but also providing stability and predictability in social action. Through vivid historical examples, Le Bon illustrates how ideas, faith, and customs have shaped revolutions, religious movements, and political upheavals. He emphasizes that understanding these cultural and psychological underpinnings is essential for anyone seeking to guide, influence, or anticipate the behavior of large groups.
Chapter 9. The Practical Implications of Crowd Psychology. In the final chapter, Le Bon synthesizes the lessons of previous chapters to highlight the practical consequences of crowd psychology. He reminds readers that crowds are emotionally charged, suggestible, and impulsive, yet they can also achieve remarkable feats when properly guided. Leaders, educators, and policymakers must understand that influence over crowds requires appeals to emotion, clear ideas, and symbolic communication, rather than logic alone. Le Bon stresses that democracies, revolutions, and mass movements are fundamentally shaped by the psychological dynamics of crowds. Public opinion, political decisions, and societal change often emerge from collective emotions and beliefs, not purely from reasoned debate. Recognizing this allows societies to predict trends, guide public behavior, and mitigate risks of mass hysteria or destructive fervor. He also warns that the danger of crowds lies in their vulnerability to manipulation. Leaders who understand the emotional currents of a group can inspire loyalty, courage, and social cohesion, but the same techniques can also provoke violence, extremism, or chaos. Knowledge of crowd psychology is therefore a tool for both construction and caution. Conclusion. Gustave Le Bon's The Crowd teaches us that human behavior is profoundly influenced by collective emotion and shared belief. Crowds are not simply a collection of individuals. They act as a single mind, guided more by sentiment than reason. From the spread of ideas to the influence of leaders and the power of faith and tradition, this book reveals the timeless forces that shape societies and historical events. If you found this summary insightful, like this video, subscribe to Read and Rise, and turn on notifications to explore more fascinating books that unlock the secrets of human behavior and social psychology.